I never believed a few short words in a text message could shatter 40 years of sacrifice. Not until my own son sent them to me. In my workshop, a place that smelled of pine and sawdust, a place where my calloused hands had built a lifetime, I read the words, "Dad, this Caribbean trip is just for our little family." In that instant, I understood. To them, I was no longer family. I was just a wallet that had run dry. But they had forgotten. The same hands that built them a home could also take it all away. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. I never thought a simple text message could make my calloused hands tremble like this. The air in my workshop was thick with the familiar scents of pine, sawdust, and machine oil, a fragrance I had breathed in for 40 years. This wasn't just a garage, it was my sanctuary. A place where everything had its order, where every wrench lay perfectly in its tray, every pair of pliers hung in a neat line on the pegboard. It was an order I had created with my own two hands, a small pocket of control in a world where I increasingly felt I no longer belonged. I had just tightened the last bolt on an old rocking chair I'd found at a flea market. Solid oak. All it needed was a little reinforcement and a fresh coat of oil to be good as new. Working with my hands always cleared my head. I slowly wiped a smear of grease from the back of my hand onto a worn rag, feeling a quiet satisfaction in the finished job. The calluses on my hands weren't flaws. They were a map of a life spent building, fixing, creating something tangible from nothing. Just then, my old phone buzzed violently on the workbench, its shrill sound shattering the silence. I figured it was Kevin, my son, calling to confirm our travel plans. We were supposed to leave for the Caribbean in a little over a week. I'd even bought a new fishing rod and a few brightly colored shirts, the kind Martha, my wife, would have surely teased me about if she were still alive. A fleeting smile touched my lips. I wiped my hands again, making sure they were clean, and picked up the phone. But it wasn't a call. It was a text. From Kevin. The words appeared on the screen, as cold and sharp as a shard of broken glass, and drove straight into my chest. "Dad, you won't be coming on the Caribbean cruise with us. Brittany feels it would be better if it was just our family." I froze. The air caught in my throat. I had to read the message a second time, then a third, trying to find some other meaning, some misunderstanding in the words. Our family. Since Martha had been taken by that damn cancer 5 years ago, my family was Kevin. He was all I had. Was I no longer a part of it? Before I could process it, before the ache could form into a coherent thought, the phone buzzed again. This time, it was Brittany, my daughter-in-law. Art, I hope you understand. It just makes things simpler for everyone. Simpler. The word echoed in my head like a hammer against my temple. Simpler without a slow old man tagging along. Simpler now that they had the house. The house I had drained my retirement savings to buy for them. The beautiful craftsman on Oakwood Lane where I had personally spent weeks refinishing the floors and installing the kitchen cabinets, making sure everything was perfect. I had done it all to give my son a solid start, a foundation that Martha and I had worked our entire lives to build. I set the phone down on the bench, the hands I'd always been proud of for their steadiness now shaking uncontrollably. I thought the gift was a testament to my love, a bond that held our family together. But now I realized, to them, maybe it was just a transaction, and the transaction was complete. My eyes stared blankly at the wall of tools, the sledgehammer that had helped me lay the foundations of a dozen homes, the circular saw that had cut through thousands of feet of lumber. These weren't just tools. They were proof of a lifetime of labor, a life I had poured my sweat into so my son wouldn't have to struggle like I did, so he could have a clean office job and a comfortable life. Disappointment rose in my throat, bitter as bile. But there were no tears. Men of my generation don't cry. We just pack the pain down inside, letting it harden into a cold, heavy lump in our chests. After a long moment, maybe minutes, maybe an eternity passed in the silence of the workshop. I took a deep breath. The trembling in my hands slowly subsided, replaced by a strange, hard stillness, like steel that had just been quenched in cold water. I had been too soft. I had given too much without demanding respect. I had mistaken their dependence for love. I picked up the phone one more time. The screen was still lit, displaying the two cruel messages. My thumb, rough and calloused, moved across the screen and typed a single word. A simple word, but it now carried an entirely different weight. It wasn't acceptance. It was an ending. Okay. That evening, the silence in my house seemed to have a physical weight. It wasn't the peaceful quiet that Martha and I used to share, but a crushing emptiness that pressed down on my shoulders, seeping into every corner, drowning out the steady tick-tock of the old grandfather clock. I sat alone in the living room, in my worn leather armchair, the one place in the house that still held a faint, familiar warmth of her, where she used to sit and knit while I read the paper. I reached for the bottle of Maker's Mark on the small end table, a habit I'd picked up since she passed, and poured a glass, fuller than usual. The amber liquid swirled under the dim lamplight, looking like a hollow promise of warmth. My gaze drifted, unfocused, over the familiar objects in the room before landing on the photograph on the mantelpiece. A new one, carefully framed in oak. It was from Kevin and Brittany's housewarming party a few months back. In the picture, I stood between them, my arm around my son's shoulders, my smile perhaps a little forced but filled with pride. Kevin was beaming, the smile of a man who had it all. Brittany leaned her head on his shoulder, her own smile perfectly calculated. We looked like a happy family, a beautifully framed lie. The whiskey glass felt heavy in my hand. The memory of that day came rushing back, so sharp and painfully vivid it was like watching a film reel in my mind. It was a perfect June day in Ohio, the sun bright but not too harsh, a light breeze rustling the leaves of the oak trees in the backyard. The smell of barbecue from the stainless steel grill I'd given them as a housewarming gift filled the air, mingling with the scent of freshly cut grass. The cheerful chatter of their friends, young people in designer clothes talking about European vacations, filled the yard. I stood by the grill, flipping perfectly marinated ribs, feeling a warm pride swell in my chest. This wasn't just a house, it was an achievement. A classic craftsman with a wide porch and sturdy wooden columns, it had a soul that modern, prefabricated homes lacked. I'd found it in a state of disrepair, neglected for years, but I saw its potential. For 2 solid months, I had driven over every single day in my old Ford pickup. I had sanded and refinished the original oak floors by hand, bringing out the beautiful grain that time had hidden. I'd built the maple kitchen cabinets myself, measuring and cutting each board with meticulous millimeter precision. I'd even reworked the plumbing, ensuring my son and his wife wouldn't have to worry about a thing for years to come. Every drop of my sweat was soaked into the wood and mortar of this house. Kevin had come over to me then, a cold beer in his hand. "You've worked too hard, Dad," he'd said, his voice tinged with a slight guilt, though his eyes were on his friends playing cornhole. "You should relax today." I just smiled and flipped the last of the ribs. This is relaxing for me. To work with my hands, to create something that lasts. That was living. Just then, Brittany walked over, radiant in an expensive-looking summer dress. She gave me a hug from behind, a little too theatrical. "Oh, Art, everything is just perfect. The house is incredible, more than we ever dreamed of," she'd gushed, her voice thick with emotion. "All my friends are so jealous. They can't believe we have a house like this so young." I felt a little embarrassed, but pleased. "As long as you two are happy." Brittany let go, but kept her hand on my arm. "We're so grateful, Dad. You'll always have a place here with us. You know that." And I had believed her. Foolishly. I had believed the single glistening tear in the corner of her eye. I had believed the manufactured sincerity in her voice. I clapped Kevin, my only son, my pride and joy, on the shoulder. Just enjoy it, son. My lawyer is filing the final registration papers with the county office. It's just a formality now. The memory faded. The party's laughter receded, leaving only the silence of my living room. I raised the whiskey to my lips and took a long swallow. The burn of the bourbon spread through my throat, a welcome fire, but it couldn't chase away the chill that had taken root in my soul. A formality. I thought it was just a formality. I thought putting their names on the deed was the final step in my gift, a way of giving them absolute security. I didn't realize that for them, it was the most important step. It was the moment they got what they wanted, and my usefulness came to an end. I had worked for 40 years, breaking my back on construction sites, my hands gnarled and my body aching, to give him a start I never had. I wanted his life to be easier. I wanted him to be free from the worry of rent, from the weight of a mortgage that would hang over him for decades. I wanted him to be able to focus on his career, on building his own family. I gave him everything, a solid foundation, a freedom few young people ever know. And in return, I wasn't family enough to go on vacation with him. I'm not a fool. I knew Brittany was behind this. She always had a way of getting what she wanted, and Kevin was too weak to stand up to her. But what hurt the most wasn't Brittany's scheming. It was Kevin's complicity. My son, the boy I had taught to swing a hammer, the boy I took fishing every weekend, the boy who cried in my arms when his mother died. He had chosen his wife's side, chosen simplicity, and cast aside the father who had given him everything. I looked at the photograph again. My smile in it looked so naive. The smile of a man who believed he was doing the right thing, who believed his sacrifice was appreciated. Now all I saw was a foolish old man, a walking wallet, a tool that had served its purpose. I drained the rest of the whiskey. The coldness in my chest was no longer just grief. It was hardening into something else. Something harder, sharper, something like steel being forged in fire. The sun rose over Cleveland the next morning, but it felt like no light could penetrate the gloom in my house. I moved like a ghost through my own familiar spaces, making a cup of coffee I couldn't taste, staring out the window without really seeing. The silence had now become a roar in my ears. Every object in the house sparked a memory, and every memory was now tainted with deceit. Martha's armchair, our wedding photo, and above all, that damn housewarming picture. I tried to keep busy. I cleaned the workshop, rearranging tools that were already perfectly organized. I washed my Ford F-150 until its red paint gleamed. But no matter what I did, those 2 text messages haunted me, etched into my mind like an epitaph on a tombstone. Around noon, the doorbell rang, pulling me from my stupor. I wasn't expecting anyone, probably a salesman. I reluctantly opened the door to find Frank Kowalski on my porch, holding a 6-pack of Great Lakes, his usual wide grin looking a little strained. "Hey, Art," he said, his voice a familiar gravelly rasp. "Was on my way home and thought, that old bastard Art is probably bored stiff. I bet you're still sore about the Browns game last night, eh?" Frank was my best friend, maybe my only one left. We'd worked construction together for 30 years, sharing lunches in our pickups, complaining about bad bosses and brutal Ohio winters. He knew me better than anyone. And right now, he knew something was wrong. His smile faded as he got a good look at my face. "Jesus, Art, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's going on?" I didn't say anything, just stepped back to let him in. Frank set the beer on the kitchen counter and looked around. The house was as neat as ever, but he could feel the heaviness in the air. "Martha, I mean, Brittany and Kevin, they all right?" he asked, choosing his words carefully. I just shook my head, a lump forming in my throat. I walked into the living room and sank into my armchair. Frank followed, grabbing 2 beers from the pack, twisting the caps off and handing one to me. He sat in the chair opposite me, waiting patiently. That's what I valued about Frank. He never pushed. I took a sip of the cold beer, but its bitterness couldn't cut through the one in my soul. The Caribbean trip, I started, my voice hoarse. It's off? Off? Why? Somebody sick? No, I said, and the bitterness finally broke through. Just my part of it is off. Frank's brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? Instead of explaining, I got up, grabbed my phone from the table, and handed it to him. See for yourself. Frank took the phone. His eyes scanned the screen. I saw his jaw tighten. The confusion on his face quickly morphed into anger. He read the two messages again and again, then looked up at me. His eyes narrowed. What the hell is this, Art? He growled. Our little family? Simpler? After everything you did for them? After that house? I just shrugged, feeling a profound, draining emptiness. That's what they said. Frank slammed his beer down on the table, sloshing some onto the wood. I can't believe this. That kid Kevin, I've known him since he was in diapers. He doesn't have the guts to say this himself. It's gotta be that Brittany. I never liked the look of her. The way her eyes always lit up when she talked about money. He stood up and started pacing the living room, gesturing wildly. Art, you broke your back for that kid. You worked twice as hard after Martha passed to make sure he had everything. You gave them a house, a paid-off house. In this day and age, that's a miracle. And this is how they repay you? By cutting you out of a damn vacation like you're some piece of luggage? Frank's anger was like a fire, and strangely, it warmed a small, cold part of me. It felt good to have someone in my corner. I don't know what to do, Frank, I admitted, my voice cracking. He's my son. Frank stopped pacing and looked me straight in the eye, his expression sober. Yeah, he's your son, but you gotta protect yourself too. They got what they wanted, and now they're showing their true colors. You better make damn sure you're covered. He paused, a thought crossing his mind. Hey, Art, what about that power of attorney thing Brittany had you sign? The one she said was to help you manage the paperwork. Frank's question hit me like a lightning bolt. I remembered that day. Brittany had shown up with a stack of papers and a notary. She'd explained it was just a formality so she could help pay my bills online and handle minor financial matters since I wasn't great with technology. I, in the blind trust of a father, had signed without reading the fine print. I thought she was looking out for me. I signed it, I stammered. Frank's face grew grim. Art, you need to check on that, right now. You need to see what she's been doing with it. People like her, they don't stop at a house. They take until there's nothing left to take. His words were like a bucket of ice water to the face. The hard truth in them was undeniable. I had been naive. I had let love blind me. I hadn't seen the warning signs, or maybe I had chosen to ignore them. The coldness in my chest was no longer grief. It had transformed. It was a cold, sharp anger. The anger of a man who realizes he has been systematically betrayed by the people he loves most. I stood up, feeling a new energy surge through me. The numbness was gone, replaced by a clear sense of purpose. You're right, Frank, I said, my voice steady now. I need to check on everything. Frank nodded, his expression softening with relief. That's the art I know. Don't let them walk all over you. You built this life from nothing. Don't let them tear it down. I looked at my old friend, filled with a deep sense of gratitude. Sometimes all a man needs is another man to remind him who he is. Thanks, Frank, I said. I mean it. He just clapped me on the shoulder. Forget about it. Now finish that beer. Then you know what you have to do. I nodded. I knew exactly what I had to do. The game had changed, and I wasn't going to be the one losing anymore. Frank left as the afternoon shadows grew long across the lawn. The six-pack was down to 4, but what he'd left me with was far more important. A purpose. The paralysis had vanished, replaced by a cold anger, a hard resolve I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer a grieving old man. I was a master craftsman, and there was a job to be done. I wasted no time. I went straight to the old oak desk in the corner of the living room, the one Martha used to use for the bills. The ancient desktop computer took a few minutes to boot up, its fan whirring like a tired sigh. Technology had never been my friend. I believed in things I could touch, things I could fix with my hands. But now I had to enter this digital world of numbers and passwords, a world where I suspected my daughter-in-law had been running wild. Brittany had helped me set up online banking a few months ago. "It's so much more convenient this way, Dad," she had chirped with a bright smile. "You won't have to worry about missing a payment." I had given her my information without a second thought, grateful for the help with these complicated new things. What a fool I'd been. With clumsy fingers, more used to a hammer than a keyboard, I typed in my password. The screen filled with numbers and charts I didn't fully understand. I found the transaction history tab and began to scroll, feeling like a stranger in my own financial life. At first, everything looked normal. The electric bill, the water bill, the insurance payment, the familiar expenses of this house. But as I scrolled further back, looking at statements from previous months, a knot of unease began to tighten in my gut. There were small, recurring payments I didn't recognize. The first one I saw was to Serenity Spa and Beauty. I frowned. Maybe a gift Brittany had bought for someone on my card and forgotten to mention? I tried to find a reasonable explanation. But then I saw another. Nordstrom credit card payment, and another. Bella's Fine Fashions. Brittany's name wasn't on them directly, but I wasn't an idiot. Martha had never shopped at Nordstrom in her life, and I sure as hell didn't go to spas. I clicked on one of the Bella's transactions. The details popped up. A monthly installment payment for some designer handbag I couldn't even pronounce. My stomach clenched. She wasn't just using my money. She was using my trust to fund her lavish lifestyle piece by piece in small, steady drips, hoping an old man like me would never notice. It wasn't just the money. It was the humiliation. She saw me as an open tab, a resource to be exploited without question. And Kevin, my son, did he know? Or did he just look the other way as long as his wife was happy and the money kept flowing? That thought hurt more than Brittany's deception. The anger inside me was no longer hot. It turned to ice. I didn't slam the desk or curse. I just sat there, staring at the screen, letting the cold, hard truth sink in. They had never seen me as family. I was just a means to an end, a walking ATM. I didn't need to see any more. I'd seen enough. I reached for my old address book, flipped to D, and found the number for Dalton and Associates, the law firm that had handled my real estate matters for 20 years. My finger dialed the number with a firm, steady press. "Dalton and Associates. How may I direct your call?" The secretary's voice was professional and cool. "This is Arthur Miller," I said, my own voice surprisingly even. "I need to speak with Mr. Dalton. It's urgent." After a brief hold, Dalton's familiar voice came on the line. "Art, good to hear from you. Everything all right? How's the new house working out for the kids?" I cut straight to the point. There was no time for pleasantries. "Hello, Mr. Dalton. I'm calling to check on the title transfer for the house on Oakwood Lane to Kevin Miller. Has the deed been officially registered?" There was a short pause on the other end, the sound of papers rustling. "Let me see," Dalton said. "Ah, here it is. It's a good thing you called, Art. I was about to contact you for a final confirmation before we file the registration next week. We had a small scheduling issue with the county office, so the file is still right here on my desk." He paused for a beat, then continued. "So, the short answer is no. Legally, you are still the sole owner." The words fell into the silent room like a judge's gavel. A strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't relief, and it wasn't joy. It was a cold, chilling clarity. A single path had opened up before me. The grief that had clung to me for 2 days vanished, replaced by the resolve of a master craftsman about to begin a critical job. "Good," I said, and my own voice surprised me. It wasn't shaky or hoarse anymore. It was steady, hard, and full of authority. Dalton sounded a bit taken aback by my tone. "Good? Is something wrong, Art?" "Stop everything," I commanded, each word deliberate. "Do not file a thing. Cancel the transfer immediately." Another pause. Longer this time. I could picture Dalton's confused expression. "Art, I'm not sure I understand. This was a significant gift. To reverse it, that could cause problems." "The problems have already started, Mr. Dalton," I replied. The chill in my voice could have frozen a river. "I'll be in your office at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to sign whatever is necessary, and I want you to have a copy of all documents related to the power of attorney I signed for my daughter-in-law, Brittany Miller. I want to know exactly what I gave her." "Of course, Art," Dalton finally said, his tone shifting to one of pure professionalism, sensing the gravity of the situation. 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll be waiting." I hung up without another word. I sat motionless for a few minutes, the phone still in my hand. The game had changed. They had underestimated me. They thought I was a sentimental old fool, easily placated with sweet words and fake smiles. They forgot that these were the hands that had built everything they were enjoying. And now, these same hands were going to take it all back. The next morning, I was awake before the sun. Sleep hadn't come, but not from restlessness. My mind, for the first time in days, was perfectly clear and sharp. The dull, numbing pain was gone. In its place was a cold focus, the same feeling I got when I was about to measure a critical cut on an expensive piece of oak. There was no room for error. I arrived at Dalton and Associates at 8:45, 15 minutes early. His office was in downtown Cleveland, a world away from my workshop. The air here smelled of paper, leather, and expensive coffee. Everything was polished and quiet, a silence born of money and power. Dalton greeted me with a firm handshake and a searching look. He was a man my age, but his hair was still dark and his suit was impeccably tailored. "Art," he said, his tone professional but laced with concern. "Come in." We sat across from each other at his massive mahogany desk. I didn't waste any time. I told him everything. The cruel text messages, the suspicious bank transactions, the conversation with Frank. I spoke calmly and factually, keeping my emotions out of it. I was like a foreman reporting on a flawed construction project, listing the problems systematically. Dalton listened intently, occasionally jotting notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he reviewed the copy of the power of attorney I had signed. His brow furrowed. "She's a clever one, Art," he said, tapping his finger on the document. "This POA gives her broad authority to manage your accounts, but it does not give her the right to spend your money on herself. What she did, paying her personal credit cards, her shopping sprees, that's clear financial abuse. We can prove that." "What about the house?" I asked, getting to the heart of the matter. "On the house, we got very lucky," Dalton replied. "Because the deed was never registered, canceling the transfer is simple. I've already drawn up the paperwork. All you need to do is sign. The house will remain completely and indisputably yours." I felt a sliver of relief, but the cold anger inside me hadn't subsided. "That's it? She lies to me, steals from me, and it all ends with a signature?" Dalton leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "We could sue her for financial abuse, Art, but it would be a long, ugly legal battle. It would drag your son into it. It would air your family's dirty laundry for the world to see." He paused, looking me directly in the eye. "The question is, How far do you want to take this? I thought for a moment. I didn't want that kind of revenge. I didn't want to drag our family name through the mud. I wanted justice, but on my own terms. Quiet, final, and irreversible. I don't want to go to court, I said, but I want to know exactly what they've been doing behind my back. I want to know everything. Dalton nodded, as if he'd expected my answer. In that case, I have a suggestion. We should hire a private investigator, someone who specializes in financial forensics. He can dig deeper into Brittany's activities, see if there's anything else we don't know about. Having the full picture will help us make the best decision. A private investigator. It sounded like something out of a movie. Part of me found it ridiculous. We were a normal family from Ohio, not the mafia. But another part of me, the cold, rational part that had just woken up, knew Dalton was right. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. This was a calculated plan. Do it, I said. Hire the best you know. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. The world outside went on, but my own world had shrunk. I spent most of my time at home, going through old paperwork, trying to piece together the full picture of my generosity and their greed. Meanwhile, on social media, a different story was unfolding. Kevin and Brittany were posting a constant stream of photos from their cruise. Brittany in an expensive bikini, sipping a cocktail by a turquoise pool. Kevin, tanned and smiling, pointing at a dolphin in the distance. The caption, "Living in paradise with my love." Looking at their fake smiles, I no longer felt pain. I just felt a cold disgust. They were enjoying their paradise on the very money they had siphoned from me, while quietly planning to take the rest. Every photo they posted only hardened my resolve. My war wasn't being fought on social media. It was being fought in silence, in phone calls with Dalton and encrypted reports from the investigator. And then, on the fourth day, the bomb dropped. I was in the workshop trying to focus on repairing an old table when my phone rang. It was Dalton. "Art, I think you should sit down," he said, his voice grave. "Our man just found something." I sat down on a stool, my heart pounding. "What is it?" "Brittany," Dalton began. "She wasn't just abusing your bank accounts. She was much bolder than that. She took the purchase agreement for the house, the one she knew wasn't legally finalized, and used it to apply for a second mortgage at a community bank." I was speechless. "Borrowing against a property she doesn't own?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Exactly," Dalton confirmed. "And the purpose of the loan? According to the application, it was for a complete kitchen remodel." Our investigator dug deeper. She already had a quote from a high-end design firm. She wanted to install a full suite of Viking appliances, quartz countertops, and custom cabinetry. A project worth nearly $50,000. Viking, quartz. The words rang in my ears. I had built that kitchen with my own two hands, with the best materials I could afford. But for Brittany, it wasn't good enough. It wasn't glamorous enough. "Did the bank approve it?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "They're in the conditional approval stage," Dalton explained. "The only condition left to meet is the officially registered title deed in the names of Kevin and Brittany Miller. The moment that paperwork comes through, the loan gets funded." I hung up the phone. I sat motionless in my workshop, surrounded by the tools that had defined my life. It was all clear now. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment betrayal. This was a long-term plan. They didn't just want a house. They wanted to turn it into a palace, using my own asset as leverage. They were betting on my silence, on my ignorance, on my eventual death. But they had made one critical miscalculation. I was still alive, and I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I stood up, walked out of the workshop, and went into the house. I picked up my phone, but this time I didn't call my lawyer. I called someone else. A real estate agent I had trusted for years. "Hello, Jean," I said when she answered. "It's Art Miller. I have a house on Oakwood Lane, and I want to sell it, immediately." Jean wasn't a woman who surprised easily. She'd been in Cleveland real estate for over 30 years and had seen it all. But my voice, the cold urgency in it, seemed to catch even her off guard. Art? Is everything okay? I thought that was Kevin's house. It's a long story, John, I replied, and I don't have time to tell it. The house is legally in my name. I need to sell it as fast as possible. I'm looking for a cash buyer, someone willing to close quickly. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I knew I was asking for the nearly impossible. But Jean was the best. Let me see what I can do, she finally said. After 40 years of building a reputation in this city, a call from Art Miller still carries weight. I'll call you back. And she did. Just 2 days later, Jean called. She had found a young couple, doctors at the Cleveland Clinic, who had just moved to the city and needed a place immediately. They were willing to pay a little over the asking price and pay all cash to expedite the process. They want to see the house this afternoon, Art. Do you want to be there? Jean asked. No, I said firmly. I won't be there. Let them have the run of the place. But I lied. That afternoon, I drove my Ford pickup to the end of Oakwood Lane and parked in the shade of an old oak tree. From there, I could see the house where every brick and every board was soaked in my sweat. I saw Jean's car and the young couple's car parked out front. I watched them get out, Jean pointing to the porch I had rebuilt myself. The young couple nodded and smiled. The wife pointed to the small garden where Martha had wanted to plant roses. The husband put his arm around her. They looked happy, full of hope for the future they would build within those walls. A sharp pain lanced through my chest. It wasn't anger, but a profound sadness. I once had that same dream for my son. But that dream was dead. I sat there, in my truck, a silent ghost watching my future being handed over to strangers. After about 15 minutes, I started the engine and drove away. I had seen enough. Everything that followed happened with a speed that is only possible when you've lived and worked in one place long enough. 40 years as a reliable contractor had bought me relationships that money couldn't. One call to Jimmy, who owned a moving company, and his crew was there the next morning. They worked efficiently and discreetly, packing up all of Kevin and Brittany's belongings. I had rented a nearby storage unit, paying for 6 months in advance. Everything they owned, from their expensive sofa to Brittany's shoe collection, was stored safely. I wasn't a monster. I was just taking back what was mine. On the day of the final closing, I sat in Dalton's office across from the young couple. They were just as radiant as the day I'd seen them tour the house. They talked about their plans to paint the nursery, to plant a vegetable garden in the backyard. They saw a future there. I only saw a past I wanted to bury. When I picked up the pen to sign my name on the sales contract, my hand was perfectly steady. There was no hesitation. This wasn't an act of rage. It was a calculated, necessary move. Every stroke of the pen was a tie being severed. I didn't feel joy. I just felt a cold relief, like a patient who has just had a tumor removed. Painful, but necessary for survival. The money from the sale was wired to a new account, one that only Dalton and I knew about. The paperwork was filed. The house had new owners. All of this happened while Kevin and Brittany were still floating on the Caribbean Sea, still posting pictures of paradise. They had no idea that when they returned, the world they thought was theirs no longer existed. They had no idea that the house they were so eager to leverage into debt had been sold, quietly, legally, and irrevocably. They had built their plans on a foundation they thought was solid, my love and my silence. But they had forgotten the most basic rule any builder knows. Never build your house on a foundation that doesn't belong to you. The day they came back was a perfect late July day in Ohio. The sky was a flawless, cloudless blue, and the sun cast a warm, golden glow on the quiet street of Oakwood Lane. The lawns were neatly manicured, the white picket fences pristine, the distant hum of a lawnmower in the air. It was the very picture of the American dream, a peacefulness built on hard work and order, a peacefulness that was about to be shattered. I was there. I parked my old Ford pickup around the corner, a few houses down, far enough to be inconspicuous but close enough to watch. I had been waiting for nearly an hour, unhurried. Patience is a virtue the craft of carpentry teaches you. You wait for the glue to set, for the stain to cure. And today, I was waiting for the truth to be revealed. As I waited, my mind was anything but quiet. It was a storm of memories. I saw Kevin as a little boy, trailing me in the workshop, his eyes wide with wonder as I turned a block of wood into a toy. I remembered the pride I felt teaching him how to hold a hammer, how to respect the tools that fed our family. Who was this man in the Lexus that was about to arrive? What had he lost on his way to becoming him? Then I saw it. Their black Lexus SUV turned onto the street, gliding with a smooth, arrogant silence that was completely out of place among the neighborhood's modest sedans and minivans. It pulled up to the curb in front of the house. My house. The doors opened. Kevin got out first, tanned and wearing a designer polo shirt and sunglasses. He looked relaxed, smug. Brittany followed, also in sunglasses, her blonde hair in an elaborate bun. She was laughing, a bright, toothy smile saying something to Kevin. I already spoke to the bank. I could practically hear the conversation. They said as soon as the deed is registered, the kitchen loan will be released. I can't wait to gut that old kitchen. They were still in their paradise bubble, completely oblivious. They walked toward the back of the car to get their luggage, and that's when they saw it. The large moving truck was parked squarely in their driveway. The back was wide open, revealing packed boxes and carefully wrapped furniture. The smile on Brittany's face froze. "What the hell?" she muttered. "New neighbors? Why are they blocking our driveway? How rude." Kevin frowned, his relaxed posture vanishing. "I don't know. Must be some kind of mistake. I'll go talk to them." But then, the front door of the house opened. A young man wearing a Cleveland Clinic t-shirt walked out, followed by a young woman carrying a potted fern. They smiled at the movers and pointed toward the living room. They looked happy. They looked like they belonged. That was the moment their bubble burst. "No," Brittany whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. "That's not possible." Kevin pulled out his phone, his tanned fingers fumbling with the screen. "I'm calling Jean. There has to be a huge mistake." But Brittany didn't wait. She strode toward the house, her pretty face now twisted with anger and confusion. "Hey, what are you people doing in our house?" she yelled, her shrill voice tearing through the neighborhood's quiet. The young couple turned, looking bewildered. The movers stopped, glancing at each other uncomfortably. A few curtains in the neighboring houses began to twitch. The show had begun. "Excuse me, ma'am," the young husband said politely. "Your house? We just bought this place. We closed 2 days ago." "Bought it? You're lying!" Brittany shrieked, panic starting to overtake her anger. "This is our house. My father-in-law bought it for us." That was my cue. I started my truck. The loud, rumbling engine of my old Ford was a stark contrast to the dead silence that had fallen over the street. Every head turned as I slowly drove up and parked across the road. I got out, taking my time. I was in my usual work clothes, jeans, a plaid shirt, and worn boots. I didn't need to dress up. In this situation, the truth was my power. "Dad!" Kevin cried out, his voice a strange mix of confusion and something else. Something that was just dawning in his eyes. Fear. Brittany's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Art, what is going on? You tell these people. Tell them this is our house." She was still trying to command me, still believing I was her tool. I crossed the street, each step slow and deliberate. I stopped on the sidewalk, a few feet from them. I looked directly at my son, searching for some trace of the boy I had raised. I found none. Welcome home, you two, I said, my voice unnervingly calm. Dad, what the hell is happening? Kevin repeated, his voice pleading now. Why are there people in our house? I let the silence hang for a moment, letting their panic sink in deeper. Then I spoke, my voice as cold as ice, each word clear and final. Because it's not your house, Kevin, I said. It never was. It was a gift of my goodwill, and that's expired. Brittany's mouth fell open. Kevin looked like he'd been struck by lightning. What? What are you talking about? He stammered. You bought it for us. You said it was just a formality. That's right, I replied. A formality. And that formality has been canceled. Brittany finally found her voice, a high-pitched shriek she reserved for when things didn't go her way. You can't do that. We have a contract. We've been living here. You have no right. I didn't even look at her. My eyes were still locked on Kevin. I stepped closer and handed him a thick file I had been carrying. These are the only contracts that matter now, I said. Kevin's hands trembled as he opened the file. His face went pale as he flipped through the pages. The document canceling the title transfer signed by me. The notarized, legally binding sales contract to the new owners. And finally, the private investigator's detailed report, listing every one of Brittany's fraudulent transactions, every dollar she had stolen from my accounts, and a copy of the second mortgage application she had filed. The proof of everything. Brittany snatched the papers from her husband's hands, her eyes darting frantically over the text. Her breathing grew shallow. She was calculating, searching for a loophole, anything to hold on to. This is all invalid, she snapped. We were managing things for your own good. You'll regret this. We were just trying to help. I let out a laugh, a dry, humorless sound. Help? You mean by draining my bank account behind my back? By leveraging a house you didn't even own for more debt? By hoping I'd just sign over my entire life to you while you were halfway around the world? Brittany's jaw clenched. She had nothing left to say. Kevin finally spoke, his voice trembling, almost a whisper. Dad, we didn't mean for this. I held up a hand. Stop. The word was quiet, but it was absolute. You didn't mean to get caught. They were both silent. For the first time, I saw it plainly on their faces. Not love, not remorse, just fear. The kind of fear people feel when they realize the person they underestimated has been watching, waiting, and has finally made their move. I turned my back, ready to leave. I had said all that needed to be said. You can't just take everything from us, Brittany screamed at my back, her voice thick with desperation. We built this life. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. You didn't build this life, I answered quietly. You stole it, piece by piece, and you thought I wouldn't notice. I kept walking toward my truck. I never looked back. Behind me, I could hear Brittany's desperate shouts turning into accusations aimed at Kevin. I could hear my son stammering, trying to make excuses. I could hear the young couple awkwardly closing their front door. The entire street of Oakwood Lane seemed to be holding its breath, witnessing the implosion of a family. But all of it sounded distant, like it was from another world, a movie in which I was no longer a character. I climbed into the cab of my old Ford. The leather on the driver's seat was cracked, and the air still smelled faintly of machine oil. It wasn't a Lexus, but it was mine. It was honest. I turned the key, and the familiar engine roared to life. I didn't drive away immediately. I just sat for a second, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Then I shifted into gear and pulled away, leaving that street, that house, and the life I once thought was mine behind me. I didn't check the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there worth seeing. On the way home, I drove without a destination. I passed through familiar Cleveland neighborhoods, past the parks where I used to push Kevin on the swings, past the construction sites where I had poured my sweat for so many years. But this time, the memories didn't hurt. They were just mile markers on a road I had already traveled. The wind coming through the open window felt clean, and it seemed to be washing away the last of the weight that had been on my shoulders for years. Eventually, I drove to the modest apartment building I had rented. It had no backyard, no workshop, just a clean two-bedroom unit on the third floor. But as I put my key in the lock and stepped inside, I felt something I had never felt in the house on Oakwood Lane. Peace. Here, no piece of furniture had been chosen by Brittany. No wall had been painted to her liking. Everything was simple, functional, and mine. My leather armchair faced the TV. My old books were stacked neatly on a shelf, and on the wall, there was only one photograph. My wedding picture with Martha, two young people smiling at a future that was all ahead of them. I got a Great Lakes beer from the fridge and sat down. I turned on the TV. The Cleveland Browns were playing. A familiar routine, a simple comfort. The sound of the announcers and the roar of the crowd filled the quiet apartment. I focused on the game, on the passes and the tackles. For the first time in weeks, my mind was blessedly empty of schemes and pain. Just then, the phone on the table beside me buzzed. I glanced at it. A text from Kevin. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to throw the phone against the wall. But another part, the part that was still a father, made me pick it up. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Brittany put me up to it. I never wanted to hurt you. Can we please talk? Please? I read the words, and a flicker of sadness passed through me. Sadness for the boy my son used to be. Sadness for the relationship we once had. He was blaming Brittany, just as I knew he would. Still refusing to take responsibility. He only remembered me now, when there was nothing left to take. My thumb hovered over the screen, over the keyboard. I could reply. I could unleash all my anger. I could tell him how deeply he had disappointed me. But then I realized, silence was more powerful than any words I could write. My silence was the answer. I placed the phone face down on the table. I turned my attention back to the game. The Browns had just scored. I raised my can of beer, its cold surface a comfort against my calloused palm. I took a sip, the familiar, slightly bitter taste on my tongue. And for the first time in years, maybe since Martha died, I felt truly at peace. I felt free. I was no longer a wallet, a fixer, a foundation for someone else's dreams. I was just Art Miller, a retired carpenter, and that was more than enough. If you found this story compelling, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear our next story, click on the box on the left of your screen. Thank you for watching.